That's Harry's.
That's my great-grandmother.
That's Harry.
Well, and the Mooger, I think she's...
Right underneath
I
it
think
says
they're all
Harry.
buried together. Wow. Oh, see, yeah, Harry. Oh, look, see? Look at that. Oh my gosh. That is so smart. They put your name on the stone, Mama. Well, I'm glad you're still here, but wow, that is such a smart idea. And Deachin. Oh my gosh. That's Paul's parents. That's who we're gonna go see. Wow. They're all together. Oh, that's my grandparents. Wow. See, this is something I can't do in Kansas City.
There's
Wow.
PopPop.
Yep.
And there's Grandma O.
Wow. Yeah, we didn't get to come for the funeral. And there's great grandma that I never met. And I did meet John, but I was so little. I mean, I saw them every time we came up when we came to visit, but I was so little. I really don't have any memories of him other than what he looked like. Wow. And that is why there's a trillion spellings, because look how it's really written. And here's Harry. Ah. Tell you what, they did a good job with these stones of making sure. See, son, Harry Garugian. Isn't that interesting? So they've got him written on his mother's stone, but then he does have his own stone. I'll bet Uncle Chucky did this. I think my Uncle Chucky did this. That was probably his original stone. That is so smart to put the children's names on the stone. And here's Deachin. Wow.
Now, who's Deachin to you?
Okay. Jimmy is my great-grandmother's son, but from her second husband. So this Deachin is actually just a shortened version of Mooger Deachin that's on this stone. So, and their son Paul is who we're going to see today. And my mother loved my Aunt Virginia.
Now behind them, there's a war one from World War II. His name is James Deachin. Is he?
Oh.
And then there's one right behind you too. It says James Deachin on the ground right over here behind you.
Yeah, so that is James. This is my Uncle Jimmy.
So he actually served in World War II?
They all did. There's a really cool newspaper clipping from the Troy Record that shows all 4 of the Garugian Mugardician children, because they were all serving in World War II at the same time.
And were they all Army Air Force, just like your grandma? Because he
Army.
is, Jimmy.
They were Army. My grandmother was.
See, his is Army Air Force also. Did you see that? He was in the Army Air Corps.
Army Air Force. Okay, yeah. My grandmother was one of the very first women to ever serve in the WAC. But yeah, all 4 of them. All 4 of them served at the same time, so they made this big deal in the newspaper about how all the Garugian Mugardician children were
Now,
serving.
would these be first generation American then?
Yes.
Okay, but Virginia and James, so those are born 1918 here in America.
Yes. Virginia's not even Armenian.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
So she's just a local gal. That's
She's
why
you.
with the name
She's
match.
you.
She's me. And what do you
She's
call
you.
me? What's my
An Odar.
An Odar.
In a loving way.
And what does Odar mean in Armenian?
Like a foreigner,
An outsider?
a non-Armenian, yes, an outsider. That's why I love my odor.
So it is the gringo of Armenian.
Yes. You're the you're the gringo.
And so was Virginia, obviously.
Yes. But she was my mom's favorite aunt.
Was she? Guess it's, as gringos are.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Now this one says John over here.
Yes.
And it's kind of
so
dirty.
This, yes, he's all covered up with mud.
And now, who's John?
This is the same John that's on this stone.
Got
That's what
you.
I'm saying. I think this was done afterwards, clearly.
So you think Chuck
So
did
I
these?
think maybe Uncle Chucky or maybe the family got together, and I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe Rosemary, your mom,
Maybe
could tell
my
you.
mom did. I don't know.
Maybe she can tell you how it happened.
I didn't think to bring like stone cleaning tools or anything.
Now he was U.S. Army in World War II. Do you know any of his stories from World War II or not?
I don't know any of their stories, but what I do know is who was it who was telling me this story? I think it was one of the who was telling me the story? They were in Japan. So my Uncle Army, or my mom's Uncle Army, another one of these sons, Armagnac, was in Japan. He was in that, what do you call that
The
theater?
Pacific Theater.
Yes. And he was in a bathroom, and they were talking in the bathroom, and one of the other people heard him talking. They said, "Army, is that you?" And they met each other over there. They hadn't seen each other in years, but they were,
And
they
these
just
are-
happened to be in the same bathroom.
And these were family members.
And they recognized the voices. Yeah, the one person in one stall recognized the other guy's voice.
Were they cousins, brothers, or
I
what?
can't remember who it was who told me the story.
Okay.
I think it was a cousin.
Now in the cemetery, I was noticing there are a lot of Armenian names.
Yes.
And
Well, they're all over here. Because these are all Armenian.
and so I take it that this part of New York is.
Hakimian.
And
There's
do you know?
Hakimians on the other side of the family. Well, no, this is the same side of the family.
But if you look all the way down, you got right next to it. It's a Panchinian, and then
The
Sun-
Drozian, Yosoyan, Bosnian, Sinukjian. I haven't heard that one before.
Do you think they all belong to the Armenian Apostolic Church here in Troy?
Most likely.
Most likely.
Yeah.
And is that where we're going to go meet? You said later.
We're supposed to go to the church later to see if they have any records for my great-grandfather.
And that would be the Armenian Apostolic, or which one is
Yes,
that?
it's Armenian Apostolic.
Outstanding.
They're all together. This is so cool.
It just blows my mind, Tracy, because being out in the Midwest, you just don't see a lot of Armenians to come into a cemetery
Yeah.
and see so many Armenian names.
Well, just like last night, we're watching the news and this commercial comes on from Maradian Furniture. It's like,
Yeah. And
there's no Armenian community in Kansas City. None to speak of, anyway.
I'm going to come over. I'm going to walk. I want you to walk over there and show some. Look at the spelling over here, behind this tree. You'll see these kind of spellings on these grave sites, or this wording.
Right, and this is why, see, and I can't read any of this. If I was trying to start to learn it, and I kind of fell away from learning it. But, so you can imagine if that name, for example, said Grajikian, it doesn't, but if it did, they were trying to spell their names using Latin letters, our letters. And so they got spelled a trillion different ways, because you can say Gurgik, that could be Girgek, it could be Gergek, and the K sound is interchangeable with the G because it's a really hard G kind of sound that sounds like a K. So they got spelled I had 27 spellings. I think I'm up to 31 now for Gurjikian because they spelled it a trillion different ways.
And Gurjikian is a family name.
Yes.
And that's the name
That's
that
the
we
other
saw.
side of the family. That's my grandfather's family. This is my grandmother's family.
And so yesterday we saw your.
Prout. Oh, that's not Armenian.
That's my partner
I
back
saw
at home.
Prout. But wow.
But yesterday we went to a Gurjikian grave,
Yes.
and that was your grandparents on your.
That was my great-grandparents, my mother's father's side. This is my mother's side.
And everyone loved PopPop, huh?
Everybody loved I heard lots of cool stories from people. Relatives I didn't know, but when I call them or get in contact with them, oh, we loved your grandfather. Everybody loved my grandfather.
What is your most favorable memory of your grandpa?
I have one memory of my grandfather.
And what is that?
I was sitting on his lap in his kitchen, and he was teaching me how to tie my shoe. Yeah, that's it. And I remember his car. He had a big white Oldsmobile car.
Was he a small man or a big man?
He was a big man.
I don't mean like that, babe.
He was a big guy. He was tall, and yeah, he was a big guy.
But yet you said he was very soft and gentle.
That's what I remember about him, being really, yeah. Well, I was sitting on his lap. He was teaching me how to tie my shoes.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all I remember about him, though. But everybody else tells these wonderful stories about how kind he was, and Manny talked about that.
And Grandma O, what was your favorite story if you're going to tell?
I am not going to tell that story. It's a funny story, but it's not.
How about a different story then? Do you have any other stories? What about her just picking up an onion and eating it?
Oh, yeah. That was weird.
Just weird stuff like that, huh?
Yeah, she would just bite into it like an apple.
Like an apple.
Yeah, that's weird.
Yeah.
Loved her, but that's weird.
She was very opinionated.
Very opinionated.
Very quick to give her opinion on things, right?
Yeah.
Strong-willed.
And I do have some of that in me.
Yeah. But she was strong-willed, huh?
She was. She was very strong.
And do you think it was she learned that from
her mother?
From her mother. And do you think that might have been the resiliency of the Armenian people? That the women did have to literally, after the genocide, almost be like...
Well, I think it was kind of that way anyway. I think that just...
solidified it?
Yeah. Yeah, from everything I understand, it's very maternal. Their families are very maternal. You know, mom runs the house kind of a thing.
And was that the way your mom described her upbringing, that Grandma O was the one that...
Well, it's definitely... I don't know how it was in other households, but my grandmother ruled the roost. And she was a tiny woman. She was 4'11". My grandfather was this big, tall, opposing man, but my grandmother ran the roost.
Now, I remember when she would come down, do you remember when we'd pick her up and take her down to the Air Force Base? She was so tickled.
Oh, yeah.
Because she told me over and over again how she was one of the first WAC.
Yes.
The Women's Army Air Corps, though, more importantly. She said not just Women's Army Corps.
Right.
She was the Women's Army Air Corps.
Yes.
And that she trained pilots on the first...
simulator, kind of?
Simulator, that's right. Flight
thing?
simulator from World War II. And she talked about it. She had a very vivid memory of it. And I remember taking her on a tour around the Air Force Base and her just being in total awe and almost teary-eyed because it brought her back memories from when she was in.
Yeah.
And
that's where she met my grandfather.
Yeah, was
in Georgia, of all places.
Yeah, so they didn't meet here in Troy, even though they both, I take it, were from here.
Yeah, they were both from here.
From Troy, and I would imagine their family.
Well, they weren't from Troy.
No.
He was in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
He was in Pennsylvania. She was here in New York, and they met in Albany, Georgia. Albany. That just dawned on me. It's Albany.
Albany, Georgia, and Troy is right next to
Albany.
Albany, New York.
I was born. Yeah.
Albany, New York.
Yeah, but the base was in Albany, Georgia, and that's where they met.
And so that makes sense why we were outside of Philly and we got to see his...
Yes, that's where he grew up, was in Pottstown. Or not no.
That's where your Chucky
That's where Chucky is. I'm mixing up all the towns. Yeah.
But don't you think that's kind of interesting that Chucky leaves Albany, moves down to Pottstown, which is in Pennsylvania, and now Ben and Greg would be his grandchildren, and Ben...
My grandfather's,
Yeah, and Ben lives not too far from his great-grandparents.
Yeah.
Where they grew up, and he lives over there in Valley Forge, which is right outside of Philadelphia.
Yeah.
Wow, Tracy, a lot of history here, huh?
Yeah, there is.
Wow.
It's really cool.
Second day, are you having fun?
I'm loving it. I'm loving it. This is cool.